Good morning, YouTube channel. So today we're doing a meth kit on a 2019 Mustang. So the purpose of this video is to give a general installation course on what it takes to put a system on a car and the things that we have to go through in being able to do so. This particular Mustang is pro-charged, as you can see there. And a couple things to note here. The customer would like to use the existing plastic washer tank as the methanol tank. And another thing we're going to be doing is adding a small little reservoir right here, making a bracket for it so that way we can keep the washer function still functioning on the car. So when you put on a kit, you have to decide where is power going to come from, where is the nozzle going to go, a general direction on what tank is going to be used, and in this case it's going to be the washer bottle, which means the pump is going to go underneath behind the bumper, and we have to gain access by getting the car up in the air. Nozzle on this car will simply go on the charge pipe, right here on before the throttle body. And let me start the process. I have to, usually when I open a hood, I take a look, make sure everything looks like it's sound, get a direction where our power is going to come from for the system, where our tank's going to be, whether it's in the trunk or under the hood, and a general idea of routing so we can get those lines and features, into the car. This particular car is a show car, and it's got it's absolutely perfect in every aspect, and he's done a wonderful job with it. So let me start proceeding. First job is let me go ahead and get the tire off the car and get it up on the lift so I can take apart the bottom front end of the car so we can get the pump and stuff hung, and I'll continue from there. Okay, wheel is off the car. We have inner fender. Typically access to this bottom area here are all these little plastic clips, and I used a little fork tool that you can get online. So we take all these little clips off, and I'll basically remove this. From here I'll see what our access is, then to see if we have to remove the bottom panel. Trying to work smart, not hard. I'll continue on. Okay, inner fender's out. Washer tank. This particular car has a beautiful thing. It's already got a built-in low level, so there's no reason to add an additional float into the tank. That way when his tank says low level, time to put more liquid into the tank in the car. All right, my next move here is I'm going to pull the washer tank off the car, and then this way by pulling it off the car I can create less mess of having this drip all over the place and putting 1.5 gallons of liquid on me. So I'm going to see how that works out, but I'll go there to the next part of the video. So with these tanks when they're full like this, to mitigate the mess, I gotta either pull the hose, but that's gonna cause it to leak anyway and create a mess. So what I'm going to do is, the kit comes with a brass plug like this, so I'm just gonna simply pop the motor up and push the plug into the hole. That'll stop it from leaking. That way I can take the whole tank out complete and not drain this mess here. I'll continue on. And there it is, voila. Motor's out and minimal fluid mess. So then I'll unplug this one here, release the little tab, that pulls straight back. Sometimes they're a little tough. Oh, it's got a little clip on it. There it is, and then you can push here. There's the tab back, like that, and then now this clip can be pushed in, I believe. There it is, tabs off. All the connectors are off of this. So the next move is take off this bolt, and we'll drop the tank down. So washer tank is out, not too much of a mess, they're pretty good. Now I gotta hang the pump somewhere on the front of this car. I noticed that on this bumper there are 4 bolts that hold the bumper on. 2 are here that come through on this side, and 2 are on the back. The 2 on the back have nuts on them, which I've already removed, see these nuts. And then I'm going to hang the pump back here with a small bracket like that, and then that way it'll basically sit in the front of the car, perfect, beautiful spot right here. It's away from harm, from getting water out of the vents or anything, and away I go. So my next move here is I'm going to finish taking those 2 bolts off and go ahead and make a little bracket so I can hang this pump from this spot. So here it is, simple bracket, piece of flat steel, and slides over the bolts. Pump will hang there. Let me continue on. Let me go ahead and paint the bracket, mount it to the pump, put the fittings, and start that process. There's the pump hung. Just temporarily set it up, make sure it bolts in place, painted the bracket. And one last little tip is since the pump's going to metal and we need a ground for the pressure switch, you can just put it on one of these bolts and simulate one less thing to do. So continuing with the installation, one of the desires the customer wanted was, since we were going to use the washer tank, the OEM one, as the alcohol tank, he wanted to keep washers functioning. So I'm going to be installing this little mini tank here, and I have to make a couple of brackets. I've removed the panel here that covers the cover with just a little snap clips, and I'm going to basically make a little bracket that goes from here, like an L, down to this bolt. And then I'm going to make another bracket from the other part of this to another bolt that's down in here. And then that way I can hold a little tank with 2 bolts and it won't move around. So preliminary bracket made. I still got to paint it. I basically made like a S-shaped bracket for the back and this one. So once I tighten these up, that'll be firmly secured. My next move is, let me go ahead and bolt up the factory tank back up again, make sure that what I did with the bracket doesn't interfere with the tank before I go ahead and paint it. I'll be back. Well, second go around, I had to remake the bracket for the little mini tank because I wanted the cap to be accessible. The other bracket put it too far in, and now I just simply spaced it out a little further. So sometimes you got to break a couple eggs to make an omelet. That's the old saying. But anyway, here's the mini tank. Next thing I have to do now is get under the car and mark where I want the outlet fitting, so I can install that, so I can run a hose down to the original motor. So the process for drilling a hole into a plastic tank is real simple. You just get a little step drill bit, and since we're using 1/8 inch NPT, which is just a little barb fitting, the hole requires to be 3/8. So I'll drill this to 3/8 where I have it marked before my black line, and then I'll simply put this little tab in there to cut threads, put a little paste and thread the fitting in. It's that simple. So here's the hole drill. The tap's already inserted. I just do it by hand. I got a socket, a 12 point with a 10 millimeter, and then I can just thread it in by hand and cut my threads. I usually only go about halfway because I want the barb fitting to have tight threads on it. Here's the fitting in the hole. I just tightened it with a socket, not all done by hand. That's all this needs. I'm going to take the brackets off now, wipe them down with some brake cleaner, and spray paint them. Next step is we have to install the outlet fitting, and I usually put it on the lowest point of the tank. That way we can get maximum output from it. On this particular tank, I like this spot right here, and I'm going to mark it with a simple marker before I drill the hole. I usually typically use a step drill bit, and these are very simple. You can get them on Amazon or anywhere else. The trick is, on our systems, you want one that the maximum size is 7/8. That way the hole cannot be too large and create problems. Anyway, let me drill the hole out, put the grommet, a little lube like WD-40, and push the barb in. So this is the hole, and you want to make sure that it's got no barbs, no lips, nothing. You simply get the rubber grommet, put it in the hole dry right here, and you make sure when you push it down that it's completely flush. See by the outside of the tank. At that point, it's just spraying a little WD-40, a little bit of lubricant, and then just pushing the barb in. That's it, tank fitting installed. So earlier on, when I took the original tank out, I went ahead and put a plug so I can get the liquid out. So now I want to go ahead and pull the plug back out, put the grommet that comes with the kit. That way everything goes in brand new. And same process, you push the grommet in, a little WD-40, push the barb plug in. There it is, fitting installed. Now I can wipe down the tank. Another important thing to do is you may want to go ahead and shake the tank out, make sure that you don't have any loose debris coming inside. I only have a little bit of washer fluid coming out. That way any of the drilling and shrapnel is not in the way and get into the pump or clog a line or something. So now let's put the fittings on the pump. We got a bracket on the pump already. You'll notice that the head of the pump is going to have an arrow in and out, and there's also a screw in the center. That's just a bypass screw. That already comes factory preset, and nobody has to mess with it. But one of the tips that I do, and this is just a personal preference, I usually will go ahead and put a little bit of white paste on the fittings, and then these are installed by hand. No wrenches or anything are put into them. If you apply too much force, you can crack and split the head of the pump. So let me put these in by hand and continue. I know that this pump, the way it's installed, the hose is going to basically point towards the car, not towards the bumper, and then the other hose is going to point up along the side of the body. Let me install the fitting so we can then hang the pump and start running wires and attaching. Here are the pump fittings. You can see a little ring of white paste all the way around on the gray. Same thing on the outlet. Now it's time to hang the pump with the two nuts on the front bumper and continue on the install. So here's our mini tank. Painted the brackets and put the hose on it, so once I drop it in I don't have to go back in there again. And then this bolts to the bolt that's by the headlight, and the other one's on the top by the core support. Washer tank mounted, secured, ain't going anywhere. Next I'm going to go ahead and start working on putting the tank back up, along with running the pressure hose and locating the filter. So now comes the part of the nozzle. This car we're doing the upgraded stainless nozzle check valve adapter and hoses because it's a show car. So what I normally do is I'll mark off where I want to put the nozzle, and this one I'm just going to put it into the silicone because that's simplest, and it's higher than the tank, so it helps alleviate in case of any siphoning issue and mitigate that as well. So I'll basically assemble the hose, put the nozzle up against the pipe, and then mark it with a marker. That way when I take the pipe off, I know exactly where to drill so I can install my fitting. And on this car, obviously by going this way, it allows me to mount the filter assembly with the pressure switch in here, in case in the event someday we might have to want ahead and adjust it or play with it. Now we have super easy access to it, and becomes real simple. See, here it is right here. So then this gets, this pressure switch has got a plug, and then this plug gets run back to the pump and it plugs in. Let me go ahead and mount the nozzle in the charge pipe so I can start assembling and putting the car together. Process for installing into silicone like this is you get the neoprene washers that come like with these kits. There's one on the nozzle and there's an extra one with the nozzle here. So these two washers, and we're going to install them. The problem is that the thickness of the rubber on the washers won't allow enough rubber, the thread penetration into the elbow when we assemble the nozzle. So the fix is we simply get a razor blade, slice off the rubber and flatten these washers, and then that way it allows a shim on the inside, shim on the outside, a little bit of blue Loctite, and we'll put it together. I'll continue on in the video. Here's the hole, and I have some threads I just got to push up and I'll get more. I'll put this washer on the outside and then simply thread the elbow from the nozzle onto it. Once I get some threads catching, I'll back it out, put a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads, and keep on assembling. So once you have a few threads exposed, I'm holding the inside with a 7/16 wrench, I'm going to put a little drop of blue Loctite, and then I'm going to put the elbow on. Blue Loctite on all of these fittings as well. Nozzle's fully assembled. It also helps to get a rag and clean any debris that might be inside the pipe. That way when it's installed, it's all fresh and nice and we don't have any trash getting into the motor. So at this point, I went ahead and tightened the hose onto the pump, connected the pump cable, plugged that in, and plugged in my 2-pin plug that goes to the pressure switch up here. Kind of hard to tell, but there it is. Anyway, and you'll also notice I used zip tie to keep both of them together. This will totally prevent any chance of it vibrating loose or anything. I got to cut off that little zip tie tip, but this part of here is done. I just got to go ahead and wrap these wires up, tidy them up with some zip ties, and make it all clean and smooth, and move on to the top. Tanks mounted, fittings are tightened, plugs are in, washer motor, here's the hose, just slips in over the nipple. I secured it to the low level, secured them on top, ran the hoses, plugged the electrical. I'm gonna go start working on the top now. I have to do the relay for power and the map sensor. I'm gonna continue on. Okay, so the supplied relay and fuse holder were mounted here. I used the mounting screw for the relay since it went in the chassis for ground, and then we basically attached the red lead to the battery post here. I still have to figure my ignition trigger, which is this gray wire. More than likely it's going to be on one of these ADA fuses that somebody has for the air suspension on this car. More than likely. Ran the wires right underneath here, forward, and here it is. I'm going to get this along with the pump cable that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and put loom on them to start protecting them. The next thing I'm going to do is take advantage that this car has a Pro Charger, and right here, the plastic tube, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it, and that'll be where I get my map signal. Put a couple of compression fittings, and then put my map sensor down here, and then run the wires accordingly inside the car. Continuing on the install, this is the 2-bar map sensor that comes with the kit. So red, I'm just going to use the red wire coming from the relay because it's automatically going to be switched. And then green is then I attach it to the green wire that comes with the kit, and I've already run that down the strut tower, and I have the wires coming over here. I still have to get a little hole in the firewall to get the wires through, but at least that part of it is already run to the back of the car. Soldered the green wire up. Let's put the heat shrink tubing over and we'll shrink it down. And then I have a fitting that I got, which has got a couple of quarter compressions with a barb. And then that's where I'm going to hook up my hose from my map sensor to. And then that's where it's going to get the boost signal. Let me continue on. So I tied the map sensor to the radiator support on top. It's not going anywhere. Nicely bolted in, tight. Put the T-fitting into the blow-off valve. That way we can sense boost, and that'll then activate the methanol kit. So at this point, I'm pretty much done with under the hood on the car, except for getting the wires inside the car and tying them down. Oh, I wanted to add on this particular car, I found an awesome ground for the map sensor right on the fender. That's a factory ground there, and that was the best one to use. So the magic fuse here to use for your ignition trigger is this little violet one. I used the test light and it's off, and when you power up the car, it's back up and working again. So battery is hooked up for the relay back here, ignition trigger, ground on the relay itself, and then the red wire runs up into the dash so we can power the kit. So I got the car up in the air. I filled up the alcohol tank full all the way to the top. Now my next move is just to inspect and touch, make sure that my fingers are all dry on all my connections. You know, reach back to the pump, touch, and I shouldn't have any any wetness, because that's one indicator that then there would be a leak. So it's always important to go through. I also went through and confirmed key on without the liquid in the tank, that I got the low washer fluid warning signal from the heads-up display. That way when it goes low, the owner will know that it's time to put more liquid in the tank. Okay, let me continue on. I gotta test the washer motor now that was added, make sure that works, and if so, I'll button up the inner fender, put the tire back on so I can work on the inside of the car. So these are the little things that sometimes come up on installations. The little washer motor didn't want to work when hooked up. It has liquid, it's burped. So what I ended up doing was I just rigged off of my little cordless thing battery 2 little wires, and for what it's worth, pin 2 inside this plug is ground. So if you put ground and power and you run it, it bleeds the air out, and then once you connect it back up to the harness, it works like a champ. So here's the washer. I guess you pull. There he goes. There he goes. Turn it off. There we go. Beautiful. So this starts the interior of the car installation. One of the things that we have to mount somewhere where it's readily visible is the activation light that lets you know when the sit is active and the pump is building pressure. What I'm going to do on this car is that I'm going to mount it down here next to the pillar. That way it's in line of sight when you're driving, can see it easily. Sometimes I'll mount them on the top. The only problem I don't like with the tops is the sunlight sometimes can hit it and you don't see it right, where down here it's kind of blocked out of the way and then you're not able to see it. That's going to be one of the things that I'm doing. The other one is locating where I'm going to put the test box. I don't know if I'm going to go yet inside the glove box or armrest, but I'm going to proceed further and go from there. You need to drill a 1/4-inch hole into here to mount the LED. So first things first, I'm just going to take the screw, bring this down, make sure there's access behind it, that I'm not drilling into something I'm not supposed to, and then fish the wire down to under the dash where the controller will go. Okay, 1/4-inch hole drilled, LED mounted, run the wires. One little tip that I always like to do is, like here, I'll leave a little loop with some extra wire. The reason being is that if this A-pillar ever has to come up and out, we don't rip the wires off the lamp. This gives it a little bit more, you know, playroom and stuff like that. Plus I've got additional wire down here to run to the controller. So that's this is just a simple good tip for, you know, future housekeeping into car changes, that we don't get into a problem and create an issue for the next person following behind me. Okay, I mounted the test box here inside the console. There's a little rubber floor mat you pull up, and it's got those 2 10mm, and that allows you to lift the back of the console up and then run the wire. So simply I punch 3 holes. One is for the bottom where the Cat 5 cable goes through, and then the other 2 holes so I can put a zip tie around the box to hold it in place. There is a piece of Velcro between the box and the car so that the box doesn't slide around. Anyway, I just wanted to add that, and very clean and out of the way. Okay, continuing on the install, wanted to bring the subject of ground. You want a very good ground, as the progressive controller uses ground to make the pump spin. So what the box does is it applies ground to make the pump spin faster and faster. So ground is super imperative for these kits. You want to use a bolt that goes to chassis. I like using this bolt like that holds the dash up. Some cars will have factory ground lugs that you can attach to, but it is imperative that we just don't put a sheet metal screw somewhere for ground and have it fail, because it'll cause the system not to work. So on the wiring of the controller, it's pretty straightforward. These are the wires that I have from under the dash, the map sensor wire, power wire from the relay, and the pump cable. inside the car, I have the red wire coming off this 2-pin that goes to the controller for power, and then these are for the activation LED. There is a 6-pin harness here, and the only wires we're going to use in this particular installation is just simply going to be orange and brown to the LED and the green for signal. Gray, violet, and red will not be used. For what it's worth, since I'm on a video, the violet is for a reduction input that would be used if the car is on a trans brake or some other reason to limit how much it sprays. Gray is for direct port setups that use a driver module. Again, that's why on this car it's not used. And then red would be used either to power the map sensor, which I did under the hood, or if I had a low level LED light or something else that required a small amount of power, I could use this red to power that. In this particular case, these 3 wires won't be used, so I'm simply going to cut them back, tape them up, that way they don't touch anything, and then strip these wires and attach them. So here is part of the connections: orange to orange, brown to brown, green to green, red to red. I've already slipped some heat shrink over the wires themselves, so that way I can just pull it back after I'm done and then protect the connection. I always suggest putting a towel or something on the bottom, so in case a little solder ball drips, it doesn't burn the carpet. Anyway, let me continue on with these connections. Connection soldered, nice and bright silver. Now we slip the heat shrink and use the heat gun for shrinking it down. I use a little portable heat gun. Oh, this slid right off. Careful, there we go. You can find these on eBay or Amazon. Some people just use a regular cigarette lighter or a little torch, but I'm just not a fan of putting fire inside of a car for any reason. So these do a great job, and you'll see that the tubing just goes over the connections, and now it insulates them, and it's a lot better than wrapping with electrical tape or something that could fall off with the heat present inside of a vehicle. I'm not opposed to using butt connectors. It's just that I like taking this little extra step on things that I do. Next is attaching the pump cable to the controller. What I did was I measured out, and I used a simple single edge razor blade, and I cut around it so I can pull the insulation off. See? Now there's going to be a bare wire in it that we're going to use, and then this foil that we could take off and discard. I'm going to get the little razor blade, cut this off, and cut this little rope that's inside there as well. And I'll continue on. One tip here is slide the black heat shrink over, because you're going to need that eventually once you tighten these terminals down. So this is the tool that I use for crimping the terminals on. You will put a little terminal on the bare wire, one on the red and one on the black. I also crimp on the bottom, so that way the top of it, where the little split is, it doesn't open up. I've already put heat shrink on the cable before doing so. Now it's just a matter of connecting red to red, black to black, and bare to white wire, and putting some heat shrink on these as well that comes with the kit. So there should be a red, black, and white. I'll slip these over these terminals, push them in, slip them back up, and heat shrink them down. A little bit of house cleaning. So I just made a little umbilical cord, and that way the controller now will go up into the dash. Last thing to note on these newer boxes that are the black and chrome ones is that they have a selector inside, Let me see if I can get some lighting. And on that selector, you can select, hard to see with the reflection, but the left-hand one is for 2 bar, the next one on the right is 2.5, and the other one's 3 bar. And that's where you set these up for, depending on the map sensor it's going to be used. Just has a little jumper that you can simply pull out. You see the tab on it, and then you can select which one it has. These newer controllers too, initial and turn on are a little different than the older ones. They're on a percentage. So basically it moves from 7 to 5, and it'll be from 0 to 100% of whatever the map sensor reading is. So right now this is set to 1/4, and if it's a 2 bar, which is 15 pounds, that puts it at about 4 pounds of boost to activate, about 3.5 pounds. Initial as well is set at about 1/4, and these knobs rotate to the right to increase the amount or on turn on boost level. So if this car ends up, we want to activate the kit at 5 or 6 pounds, then this knob would simply be moved to the right, and there's some numbers printed on it, as well as in the manual and literature that come with it. Anyway, just wanted to give that little update as well. Last thing I haven't done here is the Cat 5 cable, which I'm going to go ahead and dress underneath the dash, and then that just plugs right into the controller back here where it's got Cat 5. So I want to go ahead and conclude the video. I'll start the car and show the LED and controller and stuff like that working. Let me start it up. So LED went red to green, meaning that it's building pressure. Controller was turned on. I put the knob on 8 just for doing the test real quick. I'm going to turn it back down to about 6, and car is ready to be taken and be tuned. Was great install, very clean. Final video walkthrough engine compartment. It basically looks, forgot to flip the cap down. There you go. That's a little stainless breather, washers, nozzles, no leaks from using the system. Everything is perfect. Well, that concludes 2019 install.